When did all this happen? 500 years before the Andals. 1,000 if the true history is to be believed. Only no one knows when the Andals crossed the Narrow Sea. The true history says 4,000 years have passed since then, but some maesters claim that it was only 2. Past a certain point, all the dates grow hazy and confused, and the clarity of history becomes the fog of legend. True history is a text of the history of Westeros, presumably written by maesters. It suggests that the battle for the Dawn and the building of the wall occurred 8,000 years ago rather than 6,000 years. The text states that the Andal invasion began 4,000 years ago rather than 6,000 or 2,000. True history insists that the children of the forest abandoned the Riverlands before the arrival of the Andals, contradicting the legend of Eric the Kinslayer being an Andal who attacked Highheart. It also suggests that Alyssa Arryn lived 4,000 years ago rather than 6,000 according to legend, or 2,000 according to Maester Deniston's questions. The histories say that the conquering Andal army came to the Vale from Andalos and then spread across all of Westeros except the north. When talking about the Andal invasion of Westeros, the earliest date that usually comes up is that they came to the Vale 6,000 years ago, running from conflicts with the Valyrian freehold. The histories, written by the victors, make out the Andals to be a worthier race with superior iron weapons, but not all of the histories hold up. For instance, they did not invent iron weapons. An Exodus date of 6,000 years prior makes them seem a lot more settled in Westeros than, say, only 2,000 years. When you look closely at the associated histories of the areas they lay claim to, each area has only a passing reference to being temporarily occupied by Andals, including Andalos. It may be that deep down they were more conquerors than rulers, as Dario calls Dany in the show. For a reference in our world, 6,000 years ago, civilizations in the Fertile Crescent were just starting. 2,000 years ago saw the first Julio-Claudian Caesars in Rome. Consensus has it that 5,000 years ago in Essos was the rise of the Valyrian Empire. Before that, they were in Valyria growing their dragons for centuries, while the slave empire of Geese was the powerhouse across the Gulf of Greece. Once Valyria became a power in its own right, they fought 5 wars with Geese, the last being 4,700 years before Aegon's conquest, which brought an end to the Giscari Empire. So it doesn't seem to be likely that 6,000 years ago, the Andals were escaping the expansion of an empire that had yet to expand. They may instead have wanted to escape the consequences of their own aggressions in Essos. After their religion took hold, they may have wanted to escape the permissive culture of the Valyrians. The daughter cities of Qohor, Norvos, and Lorath were known to be populated by religious dissidents of the freehold. Armed with a sense of manifest destiny, the extremist followers of the Faith of the Seven, like our world's Calvinist English Puritans, may have crossed the sea to escape religious laxity. In the words of the Maesters, the Valyrians were more than dragon lords. They practiced blood magic and other dark arts, delving deep into the earth for secrets and twisting the flesh of beasts and men to fashion monstrous and unnatural chimeras. It is believed that for these sins, the gods in their wrath struck Valyria down. The first recorded Andal wave that left Essos arrived at the Fingers. This would be 4,000 years ago if we go by the interestingly named true history. They were by then accustomed to solving conflicts at the end of a sword, so that's how they began their residency in Westeros. Ironworking technology had spread throughout Essos. The Andals brought this Sumeri-invented iron against the First Men's bronze. But still, the local First Men were going to be difficult to overpower as the Andal invaders were vastly outnumbered. They took advantage of the disunity of the First Men to pit them against each other. They would make alliances with one group just to betray them for the other, quite like the Battle of Bosworth Field, where the Stanley Army watching from the hill to see which way the battle went. They used the many lessons they learned in Essos navigating Rhoynar, Sarnor, Ibonese, Giscari, Valyrian armies. They may have originally brought superior iron weapons, but there was no way to keep this technology to themselves pre-digital rights management. Cast-off weapons and allegiances with the First Men would mean that no matter what the Maesters claimed, iron tech would be an advantage for only a very short time. They brought colonists and clergy in the first wave, but it was the warriors who were the first to hold power. They saw the centuries-old First Men runes carved in the stones and the woodland around them, runes that told stories of great deeds and old gods. When the Andals saw the reverence given to these writings, they pretentiously began to graffiti their 7-pointed star alongside the sacred writings of the First Men. A historical epoch that may have influenced George Martin with the Andal invasion would appear to be the Iberian conquest in the Americas. The idea taught for many years was that the conquistadors replaced the top of the Aztec power hierarchy with themselves, leaving the rest of the population infrastructure in place to be worked and converted by their Catholic missionaries. Alyssa Arryn had seen her husband, her brothers, and all her children slain, and yet in life she had never shed a tear. So in death the gods had decreed that she would know no rest until her weeping watered the black earth of the Vale, where the men she had loved were buried. Alyssa had been dead 6,000 years now, and still no drop of the torrent had ever reached the valley floor far below. Caitlin wondered how large a waterfall her own tears would make when she died. How true is the tale? Alyssa Arryn did live, of that we may be reasonably sure, but it is unlikely that she lived 6,000 years ago. True history suggests 4,000 years, while Denniston halves that number in questions. To conquer Westeros, they would need to retain their identity, which they did through religion. They infiltrated the power structure by marrying their daughters to the Lords of the Vale, training the children to forget their firstmen heritage. With the Vale of Arryn secured, the firstmen families who refused to join the Andals relocated to become the Mountain Clan. Moving up the coast to the north, they hit a snare. Theon Stark, along with the Boltons, definitively beat back an Andal invasion at the Battle of Weeping Water. Then, to deter future incursions, they went to Essos and attacked Andal villages there, bringing back the heads of the slain to line the coast of the north with the piked heads. Theon then pushed the Andals back to the islands in the Bight. This came to be known by the Andals as the Rape of the Three Sisters in around 1700 BC. The chronicles of Long Sister ascribe many horrors to that conquest. Wild Northmen killing children to fill their cooking pots, soldiers drawing the entrails from living men to wind them about spits, the executions of 3,000 warriors in a single day at Headman's Mount, Balthazar Bolton's pink pavilion made from the flayed skins of 100 sistermen. Looking at this account, you see first the ubiquitous atrocity accusation of child cannibalism, but they continue on to tell of the removal of entrails, which brings to mind the sacrifices made to weirwood trees, feeding memories into the database. Then you have the Boltons' habit of flaying skins, a possible association to skin changing, traditions, barbarism, or both. This apparently set off 1,000 years of war, with the sistermen eventually taking the side of the Andals. Were there yet even enough Andals to fight wars on multiple fronts? I have no love for Northmen, he announced. The maesters say the Rape of the Three Sisters was 2,000 years ago, but Sisterton has not forgotten. We were a free people before that, with our kings ruling over us. Afterward, we had to bend our knees to the Eyrie to get the Northmen out. The wolf and the falcon fought over us for 1,000 years, till between the two of them, they had gnawed all the fat and flesh off the bones of these poor islands. The war ended when House Stark simply lost interest in ruling the Three Sisters. The control of the triumphant Arryns over the Three Sisters remained tenuous. Some sistermen still resent Northmen for the invasion. 1,000 years before the conquest, you have tales of the Horned Lord attacking from beyond the wall and the Manderleys gaining the Wolf's Den. Did the Starks lose interest, or were they distracted with more pressing concerns? 1,000 years before Aegon's conquest, the Manderleys were driven from the River Mander by House Gardner, the kings of the Reach, and fled to the north, where they were welcomed by the Starks of Winterfell as their own bannermen. The brothers Gendel and Gorn were joint kings 3,000 years ago. The Horned Lord would follow them 1,000 years after, or perhaps 2. His name is lost to history, but he is said to have used sorcery to pass the wall. Meanwhile in Essos, the remaining Andals had been fighting each other for 1,000 years. In around 1316 BC, an Andal named Carlon the Great fought for 20 years to unite the Andals before he made the error of attacking Norvos, inciting the wrath of the Freehold. Meanwhile in Dorne, the adventurers known as the Martells arrive. House Martell was founded by Morgan Martell, an Andal adventurer who settled between the mouth of the Green Blood and the Broken Arm during the coming of the Andals to Dorne. Morgan led the defeat of the local firstmen, including Houses Wade and Shell, establishing his rule over a strip of land 50 leagues long and 10 leagues wide. They did not rule as kings, but were cautious vassals of kings from Houses Jourdain, Illyrion, and Ironwood, as well as petty kings of the Green Blood. The Andals got a toehold on the continent of Westeros in the Vale and Dorne, and were turned away from the north. They could have moved to Westeros and assimilated themselves into Westerosi culture, but early on they chose cultural purity and conquest. The faith of the Seven at this point was still an Essosi religion. It would take them from hundreds to thousands of years to mold themselves to life in Westeros. In part 2 of the Andal invasion, I will talk about the spread of the Andals across the continent.